Hey you guys, we're going to try something here and we haven't done it before. So I'm going to be talking about this PowerPoint. I know it's going to be weird because not only are you going to be watching me, but I might be over your shoulder. So I can be two places at once. So anyways, we're going to look at the causes of the Civil War, the North versus the South. Causes of the Civil War. Why did it happen? I don't know, but we're going to find out. So you should have an event sheet that looks like this. You should have, for instance, Missouri Compromise. Then you should have a map and the date. And then you have 1, 2, 3 blank spots. Well, what do you do with those? What do you put in there? I'm going to show you what you put in there. So go ahead and now go to the next slide. All right, so you might be thinking, Mr. Brown, what do I do for 1, 2, and 3 for the Missouri Compromise? Well, let me tell you. So you're going to have to come up with 3 main ideas, 3 important facts about the Missouri Compromise. So to find those, what do I do? Well, first, listen to me. You need to listen to what I have to say. You also need to look at this, look what I can do, at all the markings that I make. So I might circle things, I might underline things, I might give an exclamation point, I might give an arrow. I can do so many things with this. It's amazing. So follow me and watch to see what I say. It's also good to read this, but I do not want you to just copy what is written down there, right here. If you do, you're not going to get credit for it. You will get a 0. I want you to put it into your own words. Just observations or what you think are important facts. Now later we'll talk about what I want to see, but for right now, all I want you to do is to listen, to read, and to watch. Okay? So now we'll talk about this slide. So as you're listening and watching, make sure that you can fill out 1, 2, and 3 for the Missouri Compromise. Okay, so the compromise, that means 2 groups disagree, but what they'll do is they'll allow the other side some of what they want, as long as you get what you want. So a compromise is, I don't want to go to bed at 8 p.m. I want to go to bed at midnight. But you compromise with your parents, say, fine, I'll go to bed at 10. So you get 2 more hours, but you're also not getting exactly what you want. That's a compromise. So Missouri wanted to become a free state. Not a free state, excuse me, a slave state. So the compromise, they did. Missouri's right here. And you also notice slave states are in blue. So Missouri is a slave state, and all of these in the South are slave states. But in order for that to happen, the compromise was that when Maine became a state, it was what? It was free. So the compromise was Missouri became a slave state, but Maine became a free state. So get it? Missouri and Missouri. All right. What is this big piece of land right here that we bought from France? You've learned this. Louisiana Purchase. So what does the orange mean? The orange means that these territories are closed to slavery, that there can't be slavery there right now, and because of the Missouri Compromise, once these places become states, they will not have slaves in them. Okay? So again, Missouri wanted to become a slave state. They do, in blue. Then Maine was added as a free state, which is right here. And then here's the last interesting part. This is what you want to know too. There was a line drawn at 36 degrees latitude. Remember, latitude lines go like that, basically. So they decided to make a line. The line isn't actually real, but it's an imaginary line that went all the way across here and said from now on, any state that is created, any state north of this line, so here's some arrows, when it becomes a state, there will be no slavery. Now you might ask yourself, Mr. Brown, why are these right here slave states? Because they're blue. Well, they had already been states. They were states when this law was enacted. So they were allowed to be slave states. But any other states, like over in here, nope. You're not going to be a slave state because it's north. Now, could you potentially have slavery in Texas? Because look, where's Texas? Texas is right here. Yep. So according to this line, maybe eventually you could. But we'll get into that a little bit later. So that's the first slide. So now click on the next slide and it should be Nat Turner's Rebellion. Okay, so Nat Turner's Rebellion happened in 1831. Now this is a picture of the event of a horrid massacre in Virginia. So obviously the person who wrote this probably likes more these people. Okay? But look at the picture, and what do you see in the picture? Who are the slaves? Hint. They are these people. They're darker. They don't have faces. Look, they have an axe. And oh no, look at these little kids. Right down here. So this is Nat Turner's Rebellion. So obviously this photo doesn't make Nat Turner out to be really good. But what Nat Turner did was with 60 other slaves, there was a rebellion in the South, and he and his people with him killed 50 people in Virginia. Did it work out for Nat Turner? No, it didn't. I shouldn't be laughing. But he was executed. He was killed for leading the rebellion. But what happened was slave owners were really afraid. They were like, if this can happen with Nat Turner, where slaves revolt, rebel, get away, and they kill people, maybe I'll be next. So because of this, slaves, if they had any rights, if they could do anything, if they could stay out until midnight, if their curfew was late, they didn't have a late curfew anymore. They had to be in bed by 5 p.m. And so they had less rights than they had before. But what it also did is people started talking about slavery. That if this could happen to the white people, see white people, why would the black people, the slaves, do this? And a lot of people said it was because slavery was wrong. It was just wrong. And this Nat Turner's Rebellion finally started to have people question slavery. Okay, go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, you guys, so we're going to skip around a little bit here. Not too much, though. But I want you to now go to, we went from Nat Turner's Rebellion. Now I want you to go to the second page and the Compromise of 1850. Okay? Second page, Compromise of 1850. Okay. So, we still at this point have the Missouri Compromise at 36 degrees. And you can see that because now everything, remember, Missouri Compromise, everything north was free. So look at all of these. Oh, and then we have California here that are free. Okay? That's a lot of territory. And also, we have these states, sorry, these territories that we'll talk about in just a second. Okay? So, California, as you can see, what are they? Because of the Compromise of 1850, California becomes a state, and look, they're a free state. Woohoo! Free states. I think free states are good. Then we have New Mexico, Nevada, Arizona, and Utah. So all of these that will become states in this area, again, can decide if they want to be free. All that popular sovereignty means is that you can vote on it. You can decide. If more people want slavery, then slavery exists. If more people don't want slavery, then is slavery in that state? No. So, again, California is a free state, and all of these states right here can decide for themselves what they want to be. Okay? So it's still a pretty even country, especially if these turn blue. Then you'd have almost like half of the states, right? Half the states would be slave. Slavery is legal. And then you'd have about, again, California, you'd have about half that you can't have states. So this was the Compromise of 1850. Remember, the Missouri Compromise had that line that still existed. So you can go to the next slide now. Okay, now we're on to the third one down. It's the Kansas-Nebraska Act. So what I'm going to first do is remember that line from the Missouri Compromise that was right here that said anything north of here cannot be slave. Anything south, yeah, okay. So what happened with this, the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, so about 30 years after the Missouri Compromise, got rid of the Missouri Compromise. So this line didn't exist anymore. So remember how there was no slavery north of this line? Well, now the people in that area could vote yes for it. They would decide for themselves. So again, here's the line. With the Missouri Compromise, could these states, these territories up here, once they become states, have slaves? No. But with the Kansas-Nebraska Act, they could decide for themselves. They could say no, but they could also allow slavery. So Kansas and Nebraska, so we have Kansas territory and we have Nebraska territory. They aren't states yet. But once they become states, they could decide for themselves. So they could be free states, but they didn't have to be. Now, for a second here, why do you think this made northern abolitionists, people who didn't want slavery, wanted to abolish slavery, why did it make them angry? Why? Well, think about it for a second. With the Missouri Compromise, you had this line, and nothing north of here could have slavery. That included this. But now you literally get rid of that line, and now look, instead of no slavery, now it's slavery is determined by popular sovereignty, meaning slavery is determined by if people want it or not. If more people want it, then it becomes a slave state. If people don't want it, more people don't want it, then it becomes a free state. So now these two have a choice. They can become slaves. Now these people up here, the abolitionists that did not want slavery, hated this Kansas-Nebraska Act because these right here, Kansas and Nebraska, could be slave states. And then if they start to become slave states, then if you look at it, look at the area that would be slave states. That's a lot. That's a lot. If you've noticed, Texas has become a slave state. That's a lot of land. So you'd have more more states that are slave states than states that don't allow slavery. That'd be it. So yeah, people in the North, abolitionists, again, abolitionists who don't like slavery, do not like this. Because now, the Nebraska territory and the Kansas territory can decide for themselves if they want slavery or not. And that is different from the Missouri Compromise. Because before the Missouri Compromise, you couldn't, anything north could not have slaves. But now, if you decided you wanted them, okay. Okay, now we have the Dred Scott decision. So Dred Scott was a slave. And he wanted to sue the government. So he thought the government did a bad thing to him. And so he wanted them to say that he was free. He thought he should be free because his master, the person who owned him, went to a territory, a piece of land up north that was free. So he thought, well, if I'm north, then I'm free because slavery is outlawed, and therefore why am I a slave? I don't know. I shouldn't be. So this is not good for the United States. This Dred Scott decision is something that, once you know what it is, it's not a good decision. It's a very bad decision. So what the government said is slaves, like this guy, were not U.S. citizens. They were viewed as property of someone, not or someone, of someone. So property of a master, just like a car. So I know you want to own a car. I own a car. That's what a slave is. Think about that. A person is like a car. At this time, I could own a person, just like I own a car. So he was not, and they said since he's not a citizen, he can't sue the government. He's not a citizen. He's not a person. He's a piece of property. Think about it this way. Can a car sue the government? No. And another thing that the Dred Scott decision, this is what the government said, was that any law that prevented slavery, so made slavery illegal, or made slavery go away, was against the law. You couldn't do that. So this will have an interesting observation This will be a big factor when it comes to the Civil War. So go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, we should be back in order now. So the second page is John Brown's raid. And so we need 3 facts. Okay. So first of all, this is John Brown, right here. And there's no relation. He's Mr. Brown, I'm Mr. Brown, but I am not related to him. It would have been kind of cool maybe if I was. Okay, so he was an abolitionist. Abolish, remember, abolitionist is a person who wants to abolish or get rid of slavery. So what he did with a group of men is he took control of a U.S. arsenal. A U.S. arsenal, this is the arsenal up here. See, he's shoving the gun in there. The arsenal is basically a place, a building, where the United States would store guns and gunpowder and cannons. And he took control of it because he wanted to give all the guns to slaves to cause a slave rebellion. So what a slave rebellion is that he wanted the slaves to start attacking the slave owners, their masters, and he thought if enough slaves rebelled, then the South would not have slavery anymore. And he thought that if he took control of the arsenal right here, of the place that had guns, that he would give them to the slaves and they would fight their masters. But did that happen? No, it didn't happen. There was no rebellion right here. But again, like the Dred Scott case and Nat Turner's rebellion, people were scared. The landowners didn't want, and the masters did not want slaves to fight, to rebel against them. And people thought, again, that slavery was bad. These abolitionists. And they thought that slavery should not exist enough to where they would get guns and take over a place that had guns and kill people to try to create a slave rebellion. Now, people were uptight, especially those in the North who did not want slavery. They were all almost abolitionists. But also people in the South were scared because slave rebellions, a slave war, is that good for the landowners of the South? Is that good for the people who make money? No. They're scared. And they're starting to be like, I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know if we're going to be allowed to have slavery for much longer. Go ahead and go to the next slide now. Okay. So this guy right here, this is Abraham Lincoln. And it's funny, I don't have his name. But Abe, let's see if I can do this. Abe, uh-oh, you're not going to see. Abe Lincoln. C-O-L-N. Lincoln. And then I'll put Abe here. Abe Lincoln. So he became president in 1860. That's what it says here. Now, he wanted to ban slavery in all the territories. But if you saw the compromises of 1850, of the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, could those territories, were they free or were they slave territories? They were neither. They could decide for themselves. So here's a president. This guy wanted to take those territories, and instead of saying it's up to you, no, you can't have them anymore. This does not make the South happy because they want people to decide, and they want slavery, but if you ban it, you're not going to be able to have it. So the southern states did not like this at all. And he also, well, the South, again, the South, those are the states that have slavery. They thought that since this guy didn't want slavery in the territories, that he would try to abolish, get rid of it, all over the U.S. That includes the South. So if he gets rid of slavery, what happens to the South? What happens to those owners that have all of that money and have all those people working for them? They're either going to have to start paying, or they're going to have to let them go. That's not going to be good for those people who are making a lot of money off of slavery. So they do not like this guy. So what they do is they see a country that was equal parts. The South had a lot of states that had slavery, and the North had a lot of states that didn't have slavery. But over time, what happened, because of the compromises, that a lot of the states and territories became free. And so more states and territories were free and did not allow slavery than in the South. And so the people in the South thought slavery would die. So what happens when he becomes president and they think he's going to outlaw slavery in the South, which he eventually does do? The South is going to say, we're not going to allow this. And you have states in the South start leaving the United States. And eventually, let's go to the last slide here, okay? Okay, this is the last one. The Civil War begins. So this is 1 year. See how Lincoln became president in 1860? Well, now, just 1 year later, the Civil War begins in 1861. So the southern states seceded or left the United States. They did not want to be a part of the United States anymore because they still wanted slavery. They were also known as the Confederacy. So if you hear Confederacy, that just is another name for southern states. Right there. So what they do is they attack Fort Sumter in North Carolina. Here's Fort Sumter, and here's the Confederacy, the South. Now, at this time, both these people and these people are Americans. So what you do is you have these people who are Americans firing on a fort in North Carolina that has United States military troops, soldiers in it. So this is the first time that Americans were shooting Americans. And it was all because of, remember, the manifest destiny that we start in one spot and we move west. And as we move west, some states are free, north. Some states are not free. And what happens is the scale, it goes from free to not free to free. and not free. And the South wants to save their livelihood, wants to save their money, so they go to war. And it is not a pretty war. All right, you guys, I hope you have 3 events for every single one. Save these. Your homework is to finish this and also to cut them out. And I hope this tool worked for you. Was it pretty cool? I hope it is. All right. Thanks, you guys. Oh, and now if you're done and you're in class, go ahead and look up at Mr. Brown or Mr. Newman and see what they want to do next.